Hello again, good people. Welcome back to today's video on getting back into reading for anyone, but especially towards younger people in the age of short form content, especially guys. I've found women tend to be a lot better about actively reading than most guys my age. And to begin this one, I'd like to first talk about why it's worth reading in the first place and how it's benefited me, beginning with a quote from the late great James Baldwin. You think your pain and your heartbreak are unprecedented in the history of the world, but then you read. It was Dostoevsky and Dickens who taught me that the things that tormented me most were the very things that connected me with all the people who were alive or who had ever been alive. Only if we face these open wounds in ourselves can we understand them in other people. Um, it's really a wonderful tool for empathy that we can use today to great effect. And it's a lot of fun. I think one thing I really like about it is I used to spend a lot of time on TikTok and Instagram Reels, and being a frequent reader has really reduced that hobby in myself. There's nothing wrong if you have a healthy relationship with it. I personally didn't. It was kind of inhibiting my ability to get things done in a reasonable amount of time. And I just never felt like I was getting that much out of it. It's not like watching a movie, television show, or of course reading where it's memorable, like you can be scrolling for a long time and you won't really remember anything that you saw. So, and I used it to scroll a lot less because unlike a lot of other things that people recommend as a alternative, like scrolling, you're using your hands when you read. It's a very tactile activity, and it satisfies the need a lot better than watching a television show because you always have the urge to take out your phone and multitask it, and then you're kind of just experiencing neither to the fullest extent. Why fiction? I'm a big reader of fiction, mainly classic novels, partially because I like to write, and I use it as an approach similar to film study in playing sports, like I did growing up. Watch the players you want to play like, and also get a better sense of the competition. But I think that, like the Baldwin quote suggests, it's the best way to internalize a message. There are much denser essays and nonfiction books out there. I really can't argue against that. But I think, in my experience at least, it is a lot easier to take the message and run with it. For example, reading Herman Hesse's Siddhartha was a big breakthrough for me in meditation. I'm not saying I'm a Buddha type good at it, but reading about the life of this guy and how he grew as a spiritual person throughout it really let the journey take off through me because I was able to understand it in the best way that humans can through a story. Um, and finally, there's only so many great TV shows and movies, a lot of great books out there. It's been a lot easier to get a book published for a very long time, and people have been writing novels for a lot longer than they've been making other forms of media that are popular today. Moving on, why me? I would say I'm just kind of a patient zero as a guy who, at one point when I was in high school, really not reading at all aside from what was assigned to me in English classes, and then eventually just purposefully going to rebuild the hobby because I like to write. I wanted to get better at it without just kind of throwing words at a wall. And also, I just kind of missed the feelings that reading like Diary of a Wimpy Kid and Harry Potter, The Hobbit had made me feel. Like it really is fun to get to that point of mental visualization. It's rewarding. And I have some experience at getting people back into it. People come to me for recommendations a lot, to the point where when I was in college, I even ran my fraternity's book club, which is not something you see often or pretty much ever. It was not the greatest success. People are busy doing things, more and less productive than reading in their free time. But I've worked with a lot of people who you would not traditionally call literate. We'll leave it at that. And with that is my first recommendation of a book that I think would be awesome for somebody who really is not reading very much anymore. Incredibly accessible, super fun, well paced, and it has a lot of attractive things in its premise that make people want to read it. And that is Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five. Really awesome book that Vonnegut just makes so fun despite it being not a fun subject matter at all. It is based on the author Kurt Vonnegut's real lived experience in the firebombing of Dresden during World War II. He fought there as an American soldier, and it was a really bloody affair. But instead of making this a straightforward war novel, Vonnegut really made it a next level thing by adding a strong sci-fi element in which his protagonist is, after his time in the war, is visited by these aliens known as the Tralfamadorians that cause him to be unstuck in time, is the words he uses. So everything happens at once. It's almost a sort of four-dimensional awareness. So the story is told wildly out of order, and to many this would be a frustrating thing, but you just got to trust Vonnegut here. He just makes it flow so nicely that the reader themselves are really almost experiencing time in the same way. If you're familiar with Dr. Manhattan and Watchmen, it's kind of a similar experience to that. And I think it's also very important to read because it's a story that's definitely, there is a movie of it, but like you can tell, oh, this is supposed to be a novel. Like this wouldn't really work at all as well as it does here in another medium. You want to read it as a novel, and you understand why it's in its best form here. On to our second one, a book that I could not find my copy of for this video, but still adore and think about all the time, is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. That is another really profound book, like Slaughterhouse-Five, while also perhaps being even more readable. Super accessible. I read it originally as, I think, a sophomore in high school. And like pretty much everyone reading it, I was surprised at how different it was from the popular, monster movie perception of Frankenstein. But honestly, much more entertaining, wildly philosophical. That's one thing I think a lot of people looking to get from reading want to see in a novel, is something that really makes them think, ponder ethical dilemmas and man's place in the universe. Read Frankenstein there. Real incredible. It's a great conversation piece. It's a book that's really fun to talk about in person with people, not only because it's widely read, but also it lets you grapple with any adaptation of it, and that goes for people who haven't seen it. People like to find out what has been changed over time. And people that have seen it, you can complain about the recent Guillermo del Toro one. I did not like that movie because they changed some crucial, I can understand why he did it, but like crucial aspects to the book that I really wish had made it into the movie. And Mary Shelley was a incredible woman author doing that, making one of the best books of her era at a time where it was really hard. It's still kind of hard to be a woman in art, but she had it's so much harder, really, in, I believe, the early 1800s. And next we have not just one book, but a author who I find myself recommending a lot to new readers, or returning readers, we'll say, who a lot of people wouldn't expect. And that's Cormac McCarthy. I had Blood Meridian there, but I think he has a lot of novels that are relatively well known that would fall into that category of a great re-entry to reading for young men. The Road and No Country for Old Men, especially, I think are really accessible, honestly, for how profound they are and not getting you too lost. Out of the ones mentioned, Blood Meridian still probably is the hardest, but it's very straightforward compared to a lot of other things. You know, it's not too meandering, and the meanders are my favorite part. You know, like you get a lot of beautiful concrete language and some incredible speeches and monologues by the judge, who is another reason why people really want to read this. Is they are so fascinated by his character, Judge Holden, and rightfully so. I would probably call him one of the most like interesting characters I've read, which is impressive because it's a take that's been done a lot. You know, he's not too different from a, we'll say, Emperor Palpatine in Star Wars. He's just a very evil for the sake of evil guy. And of course, that's a oversimplification of who the judge is, but hopefully you can check it out yourself. You know, a lot of people really are looking for a book with a lot of action to get back into it. Vivid mental images when you read a Cormac McCarthy novel. He is one of the most methodical guys out there. You know, like he will never take the easy way out when describing the actions of a character. You know, if they're packing a bag, they're gonna grab everything from that bag in their house and put it in a comfortable position, and that seems like it could be boring. If I wrote it, it'd probably be boring. He does it in a way that is gripping. I love all of his scenes. And going on to another author that I recommend to a lot of people getting back into it, we have a very famous author, Ernest Hemingway. Farewell to Arms with me. I also highly recommend Sun Also Rises. I think he's really just the type of guy where you take a look at the summaries of most of his novels and see what time, place, and activity of the premise interests you the most. He's another guy where you also want to take a look at his short stories, especially. We'll talk more about short stories as a whole a bit later in a video. But what's so great about Hemingway is, like McCarthy, he is very great at the pacing. He's efficient, has really strong concrete language that allows you to very easily visualize the scene. And also with Hemingway is he's got some of my favorite dialogue ever. I love reading the way that his characters talk. He has a lot of great, you know, friendship and romance in his stories, and they really make you want to dive deeper and analyze. You know, he was a big theory of omission guy, so he's not giving you a lot of internality and internal monologues like a lot of other writers want to do, which lets you blow through them faster and kind of be maybe confused at times, but it's really more of a healthy sense of pondering, like, okay, why did they act that way? And the more you think about it, the more you like the book. It sticks with you a lot. And you also just get to learn about the guy, Ernest Hemingway. Fascinating person. Lived one hell of a life. Next up is a personal favorite of mine. Also read this in high school, but have reread it a couple times, and it's pretty much always on my mind, is Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. This is for sure consensus best book to come out of Africa ever, and I can totally see why. It is an incredible read about a leading noble of a village in Nigeria at the time of first contact with English missionaries and colonialism. This character, Okonkwo, is fascinating. He's not always a great guy, most of the time not a great guy, but he is really one of my favorite main characters ever. You just really get to understand him, feel bad for him, and sometimes hate him. Um, but you always understand him. It's a incredible read for that. I will warn, there are a lot of characters at times with names that are kind of far from English, and it was originally written in English, so it could be accessible to an American and Western audience. But you have to put in a little bit of work to just get a sense of that culture, even if you can't really pronounce the names. It's so worth it in my book. It's maybe the shortest book I've talked about here. I'm not actually sure what the page counts are. None of them are terribly long, and all of them, I kind of sound like a broken record here. Wonderful pacing on that book. It's divided into three main acts. You can probably read all three in a day, but each act is probably only a little over an hour to read, I'd say. Pretty quick. And finally, just another very general recommendation, and honestly probably the best thing you could do is, if you want to read again but you just don't know where to start, is get yourself a big book of short stories. What I have here is The Art of the Short Story, which is an absolute phone book. They don't all have to be this expansive. I got that for a writing class. Writing professors love to teach you with short stories, and I get why. They're really hard to do right, but when you do, it's so incredible. Our buddy Hemingway's in here. He's one of the most celebrated ever. There's a lot of other names. Ray Bradbury, James Joyce, John Cheever, Raymond Carver, just like a lot of really, really great authors that you might not really get the full experience of if you're only reading their longer works, or if you're only reading long works in general, you probably would not encounter John Cheever or Raymond Carver. But I think what's so valuable about getting a short story book like this is that it's a sampler. You get a taste of what you want. It's the same way of, getting into listening to music and getting the hit shuffle on a playlist of very popular songs. It's like that. You get a sense of style that you want. You might figure out like, oh, hey, this Virginia Woolf lady is really, really great. I want to read more English works from the 1920s, things like that. So it really just lets you have a sense of what you like and dislike in a writer much better than I can just yap about in my video. So I would highly recommend getting a short story book. There's some short stories in here. Our buddy James Baldwin with Sonny's Blues is in this book. I'd say I like that more than any of his full-length books that I've read. I think that's the best thing he ever did, was a short story. So it never underestimate the genre, and it's a great way to get back into reading. I will say also, it's a lot less pressure. A lot of people will go in and try to do something really time consuming. A book I did, kind of getting into, I have some warnings at the end too of authors that you might want to steer clear of for the time being, despite them being celebrated and really great. Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Incredible book, not arguing that at all. I should have waited longer to tackle it. It took me over a year to finish. It is on the longer side, but it was really more because of just, I didn't have the habits built up to be able to read a book of that size and density. It has the same obstacle as Things Fall Apart, in that there are a lot of characters with names I was not great at pronouncing. Save Fyodor for later. He's awesome, one of the best ever. Anyone who's read him will tell you that. But you can wait. There's a lot of great writers out there. Other ones, Thomas Pynchon, really, really great American writer. He's Had a couple of his novels adapted into movies, most notably the reigning Best Picture from the Oscars. One Battle After Another is an adaptation of his novel Vineland. Don't start with Pynchon. He can get very complicated. Take pride in it, almost how complicated he can get. Um, it's really awesome. I'm thinking about maybe making a sequel to this video eventually, and talking about intermediate books to of once you are a reader, books to challenge yourself with and work your way up to reading some like really difficult yet rewarding books like the Moby Dicks or the Ulysses of the world. Gravity's Rainbow by Pynchon probably being in that same club. And there are good entry points and bad entry points for a guy like that. Um, Another one is the aforementioned Virginia Woolf. I would say, unless you really do like her short stories, take some time before you do like Mrs. Dalloway or To the Lighthouse. The stream of consciousness stuff is so cool once you're getting it, but if it's the first book you're reading after just having been scrolling for a while, don't lead off with her. It's some really difficult stuff. Eventually, she'll probably be one of your favorites, like she is mine, but I'd say give it some time. Um, Vladimir Nabokov, very famous for primarily Lolita, controversial book. There's also my favorite by him, Pale Fire, which is a bit popularized by the great movie Blade Runner 2049. I'd actually love to make a video talking about the parallels between Pale Fire and Blade Runner. That if anyone's interested in that. Um, you want to give him some time. Very difficult guy in both subject material, something like Lolita, and the level of nuance you're expected to go into a lot of his novels with to enjoy. Um, and once again, could be one of your favorites, but probably not if you start with him. And then finally, probably going to what on certain days is my favorite book of all time, Albert Camus, The Myth of Sisyphus. Super famous. People love talking about absurdism and all that. It's pretty great for you, but that's an essay. I think that's one thing people don't really understand going into it is, there's just an allegorical story at the very end of the essay. That's not what most of the book is about. It's really a lot more of him critiquing Don Juanism, for example. I think is probably accounting for a larger part of the essay. It can be a pretty slow read that, like Crime and Punishment, I dove into probably earlier in my return to literacy, as I was never illiterate, but like higher literacy than I should have. Camus great. He's really one of my favorites. He's got some good short stories. The Stranger, a lot of people read for their high school or college. Me personally, especially if you're Generation Z and grew up during the pandemic, give The Plague a try. That's my favorite novel that he's written. I think it's phenomenal. A little bit longer than The Stranger, but I think it's honestly easier and better. I adore The Plague. I think it is one of the best novels of the 20th century. It still feels new to this day, I guess I'm saying. So that's everything I've got for you. Drop any recommendations or disagreements in the comments if you're actually watching this. Not many viewers yet. And if there's any other books you're considering but really not sure if it's a good place to start, there's a non-zero chance I've read it. And I'd love to just engage with you, figure out if that's what the best way to do it is. Thank you.